of prey has nearly doubled. You messy little swine. Therefore, you could think there was a pressure on birds of prey in the wild, were it not for the fact that last year an awful lot of birds of prey were bred in captivity. Over 900 kestrels were. Not that anyone in their right mind would want one, but if you fall into that, you'll drown. I personally don't think that half as many are being stolen as people think, because you can see here, I mean, these are a doddle to breed once you know what you're doing. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 peregrines here, and this is not even half of what we've bred. Consequently, in the last year, exactly what we said, falconers said would happen, has happened, and the price has dropped by well over half. 2 years ago, Harris hawks were fetching as much as £2,000 each, which incidentally was double what peregrines were fetching, because they're more useful falconry birds. Now they're fetching under 1,000. It's actually quite difficult to sell tiercel peregrines. I don't know whether this is a tiercel or a female, but if it's a tiercel, it's not worth much more than this thing here, which is a caracara, which is a falconry bird. It's a complete waste of time. Now here we have incubators full of eggs. Harris hawk eggs, Saker eggs, those are Merlin eggs, those are Merlin's eggs, and that's a peregrine egg. Last one. That's chicken's eggs and some ducks. And in here we have 2 bald eagle's eggs. These 2 are secretary bird eggs, and this little one down here, well, not so little, is an African hawk eagle egg, which I don't think is going to hatch, but it will next year. If you're seriously talking about catching people who are really doing illegal things, a maximum fine of £2,000 is probably 2 birds, which is peanuts, really, when you think about it. I'd rather see them put in prison. See how the birds feel. Okay, these are common buzzards, Harris hawks, Sakers, red-headed merlins, snowy owls, and these ones are peregrine eggs here. It's extraordinary to me because the Germans have released hundreds of peregrines every year back to the wild. Whether or not it's a thrill to go across to Scotland and nick them, whether or not they consider that the Scottish birds are better than the European birds. A lot of people think the Scottish birds are the biggest of the falcons, which is not true. In fact, a lot of the Welsh ones are bigger than the Scottish ones. Why they would bother to do it is completely beyond me. And in Germany, for example, they're breeding so many peregrines now that in some places, if you buy a female peregrine, you have to get a male with it, because otherwise the breeders by the end of the year have got hundreds of males that they can't get rid of because no one wants them.
Well, in a way, I think we've been very fortunate here because no one's actually been on the cliff as yet, and this peregrine's eyrie is intact. But it's rather strange to think, and rather worrying, in fact, that many people are in a position to do some rather strange things when it comes to taking falcons' eggs. I can remember a couple of years ago, a chap, I think his name was Kerry Griffiths, who was running a falconry centre in South Wales, coming through the Green Customs Channel at Manchester Airport on a flight from North Africa. And an alert customs officer heard a cheep, cheep, cheep noise as this man walked past him in the Green Channel. And when he was searched, he was wearing a specially constructed waistcoat with 27 small pockets. And in those pockets were contained the Lana falcon's eggs. And the eggs themselves were very close to hatching. And of course, it was the chick inside the shell trying to get out that was his downfall. He was quite heavily fined in the Crown Court.
I'm not unscrupulous, and I know an awful lot of people in falconry who are very genuine people, but it would be dishonest of me to say that it doesn't attract a lot of people who maybe haven't got the scruples they should have. We've had confiscated birds brought here over the years from various different court cases, some cruelty cases, some eggs that were brought in illegally, some birds that were brought in as eggs illegally. And there have been court cases about them. It's not always fun doing it, though, because you get some very nasty behaviour from the people who you happen to be taking the birds from. Here I am showing people birds of prey and showing them how wonderful they are. And in some ways you must encourage falconry. But on the other hand, I fly in front of 1.25 million people every year. Now, I reckon I convert a lot more people to actually liking birds of prey, not going out and shooting them, and being much more aware of birds of prey and conservation than I ever do encourage them to actually go and nick them from the wild.
What we have here are the proceeds of a robbery by 2 German falconers. We're going to replace these into an active nest site, and we know already that there are only 2 eggs in this nest. They don't always lay 4 eggs, which is their full clutch, and we'll be able to substitute these, and we've worked out the timing of hatching, so it should be about the same time as the ones that are laid up there already. We're particularly pleased that this case went through so quickly. It's allowed us to do things like this. In Scotland, there is a very good system whereby a foreign national getting caught doing something like this is dealt with literally the next day, as happened on this occasion. And these 2 men were fined the day after they were caught, £6,000 each, and given no time to pay, and were actually sent immediately to jail. There's the line.
It's a good line. Get the egg.
Yeah, better not go without that.
Aye. And there's stuff in there now.
Okay, well, better get a move on here because we don't keep the birds disturbed. The illegal side of this goes back quite a long time, and we've got clear evidence that these people are going all over the world collecting illegally things like gyr falcons and peregrine falcons. And when one of these men involved in this case, Mr. Bally, had his house searched due to the good liaison between the police here and in Germany, they found maps with nest sites of rare falcons in Sardinia and Corsica, and they also had evidence that he'd been stealing birds in Alaska the previous year. So, I mean, it shows how far they'll go to get these birds, but also it must be costing a lot of money to travel to go and do it, and it shows you the profits that they're getting out of this particularly appalling illegal trade. In fact, in the area of Scotland that we're in right now, it's the only part of the British peregrine population that's actually decreasing at the present time. And it's the area that's got the highest level of robberies. And it's simply that. People are stealing the birds. But we're also getting live trapping of adults taking place in South Scotland. And that's, you know, the breeding stock is going. So it's not surprising that the numbers are going down. Yeah, this is a type of landscape that I like to look at as a conservationist. It is good for wildlife, and as we go up this pass it will get better all the time. What you can see out the window here is basically a mixture of sheep walk, areas for sheep grazing, and increasingly you'll see patches of good heather. We're just about to go past one now. And the heather areas are managed as we get up the hill here for grouse moors. Hen harriers, for instance, are very highly persecuted on grouse moors in Scotland. It's a tradition, really, to kill birds like that because they do eat some grouse. I mean, no sensible conservationist would ever say they didn't. And the thing I hear repeatedly is that somebody's on a shoot and they see a hen harrier going past, and everybody looks at the gamekeeper as though he hasn't done his job properly. So he's actually being forced to kill these birds. I'm not saying that all of the situations are like that. In many of the cases I see, the gamekeeper is quite, he feels that it's part of his job to kill birds like that. And it goes on every year, we find out about it, but it's very